The body of a child has been found in a pit latrine in Vaalbank. That's at a school in the Eastern Cape. Police have now opened an inquest docket. Equal education researcher Jane Borman joins us tonight. Jane, a very good evening to you. Grateful for your time. So this issue, this tragedy, speaks to the very fight about the eradication of pit toilets at public schools in the country, does it not? Especially in rural parts of the country.
Yes, thanks for having me on. And obviously, this is an absolutely devastating event that has happened. And, you know, it really, obviously we need to let the inquest determine what exactly happened. But ultimately, we've been saying again and again that pit latrines should not be at schools. They are illegal. And we have unfortunately once again now seen, in whatever capacity, a pit latrine in a child's death.
And as you say, we're going to wait for the police investigation. What we are waiting to hear is whether the child fell into the latrine or if she was killed and her body dumped in there, because that is what we now need to determine. But ultimately, you and I are basically talking about the existence of the latrines and how much of a danger they are to children anyway. I remember a case, it was Michael Komape in Limpopo, who also, he actually fell into a latrine and died a few years ago.
Yes, exactly. And that death was obviously a huge, huge tragedy. But unfortunately, one death of a child involving a latrine is one too many. But unfortunately, despite, incidences and harm to children involving pit latrines, we have yet to see the political will from government to fully eradicate what is essentially a dangerous structure on school property. No parent wants to send their child to school where they feel that their safety might be at risk. And this is a very basic way that the government can ensure that learners are safer at school. And, it really just, again, brings home the point that these pit latrines still do exist at schools.
Without apportioning blame, there needs to be questions asked in this case about the care of children, because this little girl had gone to school the previous day, and from what I've seen, it was only the next day when she hadn't returned home that the mother is said to have gone back to the school to inquire, and you wonder why it is that a child, especially of primary school going age, would not have been seen in the afternoon, in the evening, and only the day after someone had basically tried to figure out what had happened.
Well, obviously, there are many facts about this case that myself and yourself are unaware of. At the end of the day, we'll have to see what comes out with this inquest, but for equal education, and I'm sure for many parents across the country who have to send their children to schools where these pit latrines still exist, it's a stark reminder of the fact that pit latrines are still there. Our children are still having to suffer the indignities of having to use pit latrines, and their safety is still put at risk, whether it is through, harm themselves or merely the fact that pit latrines are a structure in which perhaps in this case they were able to if something happened to this learner outside, they were able to put the body within the pit latrine. So, whatever the circumstances, it's a reminder that these pit latrines are a danger to learners' safety, and that we must remind government that it's their constitutional obligation to make sure that these pit latrines are done away with.
And when you look at pit latrines, around 2021, I've just actually pulled up an article that looked in September at the number of pit latrines in the country, and it said that pupils from more than 3,000 schools in 6 provinces risked falling into pit toilets every day. And that was according to the Human Rights Commission back then. How much progress has been made towards the eradication in the 2 years since?
There has been some progress. I think that, it's difficult because although all progress is important, we have to look at the fact that this has been an issue that the norms and standards stated that this issue of pit latrines needed to have been sorted out years ago. So although there has been some more progress and there is slow but steady progress towards the goal of eradicating it, how is it that it takes almost 29 years of the advent of democracy to implement such a basic universal, school infrastructure sanitation. So for us, the progress is too slow. It's far, far too slow, and then these incidences do occur. Whether or not this, we don't know exactly what happened in this case, but the fact of the matter remains that pit latrines should be nowhere in school property and should not be involved in any incidents regarding children.
And the Eastern Cape is where this tragedy happened, and as you keep saying, we need to caveat that with the fact that we don't know the circumstances of the death, and all of that is now the subject of a police inquest. But in this article, which was published, in fact, by the Sunday Times back in 2021, based on information from the Human Rights Commission, the Eastern Cape province, they said at the time, had 2,236 schools that were using pit latrines. And it's always, when you look at this, yes, it's a safety issue, but also in terms of a hygiene level, it's always the poorest South Africans who often have little to no other choice who have to or are forced to put up with this.
Exactly. And I think that, the fact that there seems to be a lack of political will to address this really does speak to whether or not government is truly trying to be a government for all, or whether it really feels that, as long as they aren't affected and the wealthy and the elite, whether it's political, economic elite, aren't affected, that somehow this issue is not a priority. It's just completely incorrect. And it is an embarrassment, and it is truly a failure of government that pit latrines, unsafe pit latrines, still exist at schools.
Is the problem money? Is a budget really the main reason why we haven't seen this project move at faster speed?
No. I mean, obviously there are budget constraints, and we operate within an economic environment where, there isn't endless amounts of money. But, specifically certain provinces, I think it was the Eastern Cape, had funding, some of their school infrastructure funding taken away from them because the province was unable to properly plan and execute these infrastructure projects. There's also huge amounts of wasteful spending, irregular expenditure, or, as I just stated, simply under expenditure, where provinces just don't spend the money that is allocated to them. So there is much more that provincial governments could do with the money that is allocated to them. And particularly the Eastern Cape, having a huge chunk of money rediverted from your province to another province because you are unable to properly plan and spend that money, that really shows that a huge amount of the problems lies with provinces' capacity themselves, not just an issue of money.
Thank you very much for that, Jane Borman, Equal Education Researcher. Thank you for your time.